If that is the case, it is actually quite shameful. It makes you think that Canadian government doesn't actually care about Canada really. Okay, that's the impression I'm getting based on his views. But guess what? Based on what he's been saying all this while, there will be no Canada. The spirit of Canada will be gone in no time. Canada is going towards its own destruction by not taking care of its own people. Given the immigration hassles in the United States, a lot of people have been saying that Canada might be a better option. And many people have been asking me, sending me messages, asking if Canada is a better option. However, as you might know, there are many issues in Canada as well. And while immigrants are going to Canada in record numbers, there are also some people who are actually leaving Canada. If there are no immigration hassles in Canada, why are people leaving Canada? And then I came across this video on YouTube where a Canadian, not an immigrant who became Canadian, but actual Canadian is leaving Canada. And I was quite surprised. Let me be upfront. I saw the first 1 minute of this video already, and I will watch this video, listen to what this person has to say, and then I will give my input so that you can actually make your best decisions based on your circumstances. So let's begin.
So I'm leaving Canada in about a week, even less than a week now, and I want to talk about some of the problems Canada has so that people arriving in Canada can kind of know what they're getting themselves into. So here's 6 reasons I'm leaving Canada and 6 things you should be aware of when you're coming to Canada. Number 1 is the international student program is being misused and taken advantage of, and it's developed into this whole scam. There's a thing called a Diploma mill. Now the Diploma mill is, I've never heard of this word until like 3 years ago, and now it's everywhere. There's these small strip malls, like very, very small, I don't know, colleges they're calling themselves, even though they're not colleges at all. They're just, I don't know, someone paying $5,000 a month in rent in a small little strip mall with like 600 feet of square space, and they bring in students from overseas and fraudulently say they're studying some kind of nuanced program, like I don't know, like a business administration course or some kind of journalism course, something that they don't actually study for. They just go to that school once a week to show the government that they're studying, and then they try to find work in Canada. That school, that fake school, is just to get them here, and people are taking advantage of it. And with all these students flooding Canada, they are misusing and abusing food banks and other social support services meant for vulnerable Canadian citizens and families. Food banks are to provide usually canned food and cheap food for people that can't or are struggling to afford groceries, as we're in like a grocery crisis right now. Grocery prices are through the roof and Canadians cannot afford it. Number 2.
Okay, so first thing first, he talks about diploma mills, and based on my understanding, he is bang on. I think what is going on is that some people in Canada realized that, you know what, there is large demand for education here. Realistically speaking, people from underdeveloped or developing countries want to move to a developed country so that they can make more money. Now, getting a job in that country from your home country is much harder. So going for a degree is actually an easier way, so that you can at least go for a degree, move to that country, live there for long enough, and then start looking for a job there. And then if you have a degree from that country, it adds to your benefit, because as compared to someone who does not have a degree in that country. So education is actually a perfect way for people who are intending to live in another country for a long term. However, what is going on here is that some people in Canada have realized that this could be a profitable business, and they opened some not so real universities, what he calls diploma mills. And what is going on here is that if you are a student and if you go to one of these universities, which are unknown universities, and then if you struggle there, if you are not getting good quality of education there, if they are not teaching you well, it was your own mistake, you're bad. Okay, so you are going to that country because most likely you could not get anything done in your own home country. Now, how to resolve the situation? So a simple solution to avoid such a situation is that you apply to a university in Canada only and only if it is among the, say, top 30 universities, maybe top 35 universities, because there are not that many universities in Canada given the small population. And if it is not among the top 30 universities, I would guess maybe the real number is top 20 universities. I don't know. But if it is at least not in the top 30 ranked universities in Canada, probably it is leaning towards being a diploma mill. So be very watchful and careful. And if you are a genuine student, you should go into these select universities only. And if you cannot get in, probably you should not go to Canada. And if you are still going to Canada, you are probably doing that only to immigrate there, and you are not really interested in education, is what my view is about this. I think that if you want to study in Canada, be mindful of the fact that Canada geographically is a large country, but population wise it's a very, very small country. Canadian population is as much as the population of California. Okay, Canadian population I think is actually smaller than population of Punjab. Punjab is just one state in India, whereas Canada actually is a whole country. Now don't quote me on this, I need to check what is the population of Punjab versus Canada. I think Canada has 35 million people or 3.5 crore people, and Punjab might also have more or less the same number, maybe I would guess between 3 to 5 crore people. Now, second point he makes is the use of food bank by international students. The point that he's trying to make here, as per my understanding, is that food banks are there in a country to support poor people, poor citizens who are subjected to poverty, who have been pushed into poverty, to take care of them as well. It's a welfare scheme run by the government, and taxpayers of that country pay for it. Now, if you're an international student, you had to prove to the consular officer that you can afford to get education there. So you are supposed to have enough money to pay for yourself. Now, if you go to Canada and start using food bank, in a way you are actually, in some way at least, you are violating your visa conditions. May not be legally, but in spirit at least. So when he raises the issue that international students are utilizing food banks, I think the reason could have been that people who come from difficult backgrounds, they somehow got the visa and moved to Canada, but living expenses in Canada are probably becoming so high that a lot of money that they get from India or other countries, and even if they're working in Canada, it barely fills up for their rent. Okay, and then they do not have as much money to do other things. You still have to pay for your phone plan, internet plan, and all these things. And if you are running really low on money, and if there is food bank where you can get free food, I think people are utilizing that, international students, and that is quite bothersome for Canadians, because these foreigners who have not paid their taxes and who are not citizens of this country are utilizing services that are supposedly exclusive for citizens of that country. So I think that is one point, but how does that point apply in leaving Canada? I'm not entirely sure, but at least he made that point, which is quite important. Okay, the second point he makes is about high-skilled immigration change. So let's see what he has to say here.
Number two is the high-skilled immigration that recently changed. Instead of bringing in high-skilled, specific shortage immigrants, we allowed the business lobby to control the narrative with public officials and flood the nation with cheap, exploitable labor. So now we have huge lineups for basic jobs like a grocery store, which should be, for Canadian teenagers, it's their first part-time job, something like that. That's how it was when I was growing up. And now it is insane.
Oh. People are struggling to get into the line.
Just tons of immigrants waiting in line trying to get a minimum wage job just so they can survive in Canada. So there's a problem here too with fraudulent documents. So immigrants are coming to Canada and they're lying on their resumes to get a better job that they're not qualified for, and they're taking that job from a Canadian usually. Now we've got people who are unqualified to be working these jobs and kind of here, not illegally, but almost illegally. Additionally, we're told that we're bringing people in to build houses. Almost none of the people by hard, cold data work in the field of residential construction. Does that make sense? So we're bringing in immigrants to help build houses because Canada's in a housing crisis, and yet none of them are working in the construction industry. How does that make sense to anyone? So growing up, Canada was still a melting pot of tons of different people from all over the world, but they were highly skilled people, an asset to our country. A lot of the doctors I had growing up were either Chinese or Indian, and they had high status jobs. And then a lot of, we had like a nurse shortage, and we brought in a lot of Filipino nurses to Canada. These people do not buy into housing bubbles economies, though we have to market Canada to them, and that means fixing Canada. It would be a win-win if our leaders weren't so corrupt and criminally negligent. Number 3 is the temporary foreign worker.
Okay, now this is a big issue. If you are a Canadian citizen who was probably born and raised there, and if you grew up in 80s and 90s and maybe even early 2000s, probably the immigrants that you saw were highly qualified immigrants like doctors, scientists, professors, nurses, and all those things. And what he's saying is that a lot of people who are coming now are actually not looking for very high skilled jobs where there is actual shortage. What many immigrants in Canada are doing now is that they are looking for jobs that are not so high skilled jobs. When you are a youngster, when you are a teenager, you're not looking for a doctor's job, right? You are looking for a job that pays your bills, and maybe if not pay your bills, at least pays your pocket money so that you can save some money for yourself rather than relying on your family members. Now, if you are a teenager in Canada and you were supposed to get a job as a waiter or as a cashier very easily, now instead of that, if you have to compete with a lot of immigrants, then it can be a painful experience. I fear that it can actually give rise to resentment against immigrants in Canada, at least by people who were born and raised there. Because now, from the immigrants' perspective, they are looking for some way to survive. I think they have taken some heavy loans in their home countries to come here, and they want to make some money in any which way. And if they're looking for small scale jobs like a waiter or a receptionist and all these things that native Canadians should be easily getting, I think it is quite unfair to Canadian population as well. So that is what he's complaining about, and I think his complaint is quite justified. I think that what it, and second point that he makes is that people, even for more or less high skilled jobs, people are giving their fake resumes. I think what he means by that is that probably people are showing work experience in that area where they might not have real work experience. And if that is the case, then if you are showing 2 years of experience and an immigrant is showing maybe 5-6 years of experience in the same area, I think that immigrant might be favored. But you actually have real experience, whereas the other person might not have real experience there if they are faking their resume as he claims. So is this a valid reason? I think it absolutely is, because if you have to struggle so much to look for a job in your home country, what do? You go elsewhere. Just like how immigrants left their country because it was hard for them to get a job in their country, they are making it very hard for Canadians to get a job in their own country. So the competition from one country is being translated and being offshored to another country, which can be quite a painful task if you're Canadian. And I think one of the issues that could also happen is that if an immigrant is applying for a job in some position, and if the person who is hiring for that position, let's say a gas station job, right? What might happen is that a Canadian would work at that gas station, but legally. And what that means is that they have to pay the minimum wage and file taxes and file tax forms and all such things. Whereas an immigrant, let's say a Canadian minimum wage is something, I don't know, $10, okay? And if you hire a Canadian, you have to pay full $10 by law. And an immigrant comes along and that you can pay that immigrant, let's say $7 without actually legally hiring him. And if that immigrant is working illegally for $7, you're actually saving all that money. So it gives you incentive to hire an immigrant over a Canadian. And that is what could be happening in Canada. And that is why it is pushing a Canadian out of Canada, is my best guess. Now he talks about temporary foreign worker program. And before I go ahead, I think he also mentioned that people talk about housing shortages. but immigrants who are supposed to be working on housing industry or construction industry are actually not doing that job. They are doing some other jobs. So even though they are bringing immigrants to Canada, the purpose for which these immigrants were brought in, they are not being utilized in that area, which is also quite problematic. And he blames the government and greedy people, and he claims corruption on the part of some government officials. If that is the case, it is actually quite shameful. It makes you think that Canadian government doesn't actually care about Canada really. Okay, that's the impression I'm getting based on his views. Okay, now he talks about temporary foreign worker program. So let's see what he says.
Number 3 is the temporary foreign worker problem. Both Justin Trudeau and the NDP leader Singh talked against this program for its misuse and abuse, when it actually was used to hurt Canadian workers and their bargaining power and access to positions. Then Justin Trudeau expanded the program when he got into power. Number 4, and I'm getting more stressed out just talking about.
Okay, I think this point was not as elaborate as his previous point, but I think this point is more or less the same as the previous point, is inflation of competition for job market, or inflation of competition in the job market because of high scale of immigration. Okay, next thing he talks about is refugees and asylum. So let's see what he says.
4 is the refugee and asylum program, bringing immigrants into Canada, and a lot of them are claiming asylum when they really shouldn't be.
Canada, like many other countries, has become addicted to temporary foreign workers.
Over the next 3 years, it wants to reduce the number of temporary foreign residents from 6.2% of the Canadian population to 5%, and lower the number of foreign workers a business can hire, though it will carve out exemptions for the construction, healthcare, and agriculture sectors.
This also encourages employers to prioritize workers that are already here, able and willing to do those roles. As of May 1st, we are asking employers that after they consider and offer the job to Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and refugees, that they also now prioritize recruiting asylum seekers.
Some observers say it could help deal with the shortage of housing and ease the affordability crisis.
Many people are scamming the system and using rehearsed lines and nation shopping. The amount of money and resources we're spending on these people when we have our own vulnerable citizens and families living in tents and lining up for free food is despicable. The people with the mentality to try and scam Canada to get free hotel citizenship should be kept as far away from Canada as possible. I read an article the other day about a man from the Bahamas who ended up moving to Canada, and he was able to claim asylum from the Bahamas. Now, the Bahamas is a nice place. It didn't make sense at all. And so he was staying in a hotel for free, and he was staying in a nice hotel in Niagara Falls, like right next to the falls, for free. And you know who was paying for it? Were the Canadians, our tax dollars.
Oh my
He was
goodness.
using some kind of pre-given script to, tell the government employees what to say, and he took advantage of the system, and we are paying for it. Number 5 is the...
Okay, what he just said, it makes you believe literally that Canadian system, which was designed to give opportunity for asylum seekers and refugees with good intentions, with very kind intentions, makes them, which is a Canadian system, looks like a fool. Okay, there's no nice way to put it. This is absolutely foolish. Canadians with their large hearts were opening their hearts for people, and now they are allowing the same large-heartedness to abuse themselves. Okay, when he says that fake asylum seekers, I think there are a large number of fake asylum seekers who they think that if we go to another country like Canada, how could we go there, because they do not have real skills. So all they do is that make some false claims that we are being persecuted by our government and so on, and then using those false claims, they claim for asylum, and then they get through that immigration process. Now what happens here is that when you do that, you're actually adding more and more pressure on the honest taxpayers of that country. Now what happens many times is that there are many criminal elements in many countries. Let's say if you have committed some kind of crime and the government is hunting you, and then you escape your country, go to Canada, and claim that you are an activist in a particular area, and because you are an activist, the government is hunting you. You won't tell that you have actual criminal charges against you, and then you claim asylum and immigrate to that country. If Canada allows that to happen, I think, dear Canadian people, I think you are really making a fool of yourself. I know you have good intentions, but taking asylum seekers from all over the world should not be your responsibility. Okay, you will end up regretting it later. Okay, if you want to be a good country, if you want to be, see, it is important to be good, but it is also more important to be strong. If you're not strong and you're just good, all that will happen is that you will allow yourself to be abused by others. You need to be strong first and then try and be good. And let's say what he says next, LMIA, let's see what it means.
Lima, the Labor Market Impact Assessment. Basically a document that an employer in Canada may need to get before hiring a foreign worker. When jobs in Canada come up, like good jobs, it should be Canadians that get them first because we are citizens. And let's say there's no Canadian that can do this job and we need to hire someone from outside the country to do it. This is what this program is for. It's being abused and scammed and taken advantage of. We have employers pretending to advertise jobs in Canada to Canadians and then sell the jobs on the international market for envelopes of cash under the table, pretending they couldn't find Canadian workers. Or they use those lines as a way to get family and friends over. If they own their own business, they are responsible for hiring. So the government's not cracking down on this at all. Number 6 is the...
Okay, this sounds very familiar. This happens in the US quite a bit when people put some shady IT company just to hire their own family and friends, and they put fake advertisements even though they have no intention to hire someone because they've already hired someone. So they will put up the advertisement and then claim that those people who applied for those positions were not qualified or we got no applications at all. The advertisement is required because it is required by law, so to make sure that people from that country who are born and raised, who are citizens of that country, do not have to suffer. Okay, they get that opportunity first. But if that is what is happening in Canada as well, it is quite shameful. Again, I know that Canada is the most immigrant-friendly country, but guess what? Based on what he's been saying all this while, there will be no Canada. The spirit of Canada will be gone in no time. Canada is going towards its own destruction by not taking care of its own people. Wake up, Canada. That's all I can say. By the way, I have nothing to do with Canada. I have no financial interest or any kind of interest in Canada. I've been to Canada 2-3 times. I think it's a nice country, super expensive. Even like 10-12 years ago when I was there the last time, I think US is much better place to live. But the way Canada is going, just to show their large-heartedness and show their moral superiority, they are going down the drain in the long run. Okay, you need Canadians with the Canadian spirit to run Canada. If you allow other people to take advantage or unfair advantage of your system, well, you are letting yourself go down the drain.
Rising crime in Canada. There's this crazy amount of car thefts going on right now. It's not as safe as it once was. People are breaking the law. The homeless are desperate to try to find food and are acting out. Drugs are on the rise. It's really not a good situation. So I'm going to be leaving Canada and moving to Japan within a week. And I just wanted to give this as a heads up for anyone considering their options in Canada and anyone considering coming to Canada. This is some of the problems you're going to be faced with.
Okay, so what he's saying here is that the quality of life in Canada is going down the drain. Okay, so immigrants from other countries, because the quality of life they had was quite difficult, so to improve their own lives, they are moving to Canada, which is not a problem at all if it is at a smaller enough scale. But when the scale of this becomes so large that people who go from countries that are struggling, they bring their problems, they are introducing new problems to Canada. and because of which now the quality of life in Canada itself is suffering. When he says that people are not getting jobs, people are going towards drugs, people cannot afford to live in a nice home, all those reasons are the reasons for which people wanted to move to Canada, because Canada was supposed to have good jobs, Canada was supposed to have affordable lifestyle, Canada was supposed to have safe system, you were not supposed to have crime there. And if all these things are happening in Canada, where is the Canada that was a great country? So overall, this is a very alarming video, I would guess, and this is quite a worrying situation. So Canadian people, guess what? You need to take care of your country. I think the politicians of your country, apparently, based on what he says, are not doing their job wisely. And I'm not saying that the immigrants need to be blamed. I am pretty sure that the vast majority of immigrants are good people trying to live a better life. But then Canadian system is allowing itself to be exploited, to be misused, and you need to fix that misuse. You need to enforce laws stringently. So Canadians, take care of yourself. This is a shocking video in many ways, but what is true should be spoken. Truth must be spoken, right? Thank you for watching. Jai Hind, and may God bless the United States of America. I'm happy I'm in the US, not in Canada.